It's Robert Lewis, who is a senior manager in healthcare. Mr. Lewis, your question.
How certain can you be that your party's policies will deal with the budget deficits without damaging economic growth?
Mr. Cameron.
Well, this is an absolutely vital question, and I'm glad it's been asked, because we've got to get this economy moving. We've got to get this economy growing. And what we say is save £6 billion in the current year in order to stop the jobs tax, which we think will derail the recovery. Because if you put a tax on jobs, that I think is a jobs killer, it's a recovery killer, it's an economy killer. And 100 of the leading business people in this country, people who run companies like Sainsbury's and Marks and Spencer's and Mothercare, have all said that the threat to recovery is not cutting out waste, as we say. The threat to recovery is Labour's proposal for a jobs tax. So I think we've got to remove this dark cloud of the deficit over our economy, and it makes sense to make a start on that now. Start this year to avoid the tax next year, and then we can go forward with further plans to remove our deficit and our debt that's going to hold our country back if we're not very careful.
Where are you, Robert? I could hear your voice, but there you are, right at the back. Sorry, behind the camera. Now I can see you. Robert, I think we need to just be open with you, straight with you, and we've sought to do that. We have specified, I think we're the only party in politics now, in our manifesto, look at the back of our manifesto, which says, here are the figures, this is the way that we would find cuts and savings of £15 billion. How would we do that? By things like removing tax credits for the top 20% of recipients of tax credits, ending the Child Trust Fund, which gives £250 to all 18-year-olds. I'd love to give everybody £250, but I just don't think we can afford it right now. Putting a cap of £400 on any pay increases in the public sector for the next 2 years. But also some long-term choices. I'm the only leader here who's saying very clearly, I don't think we can either justify or afford the like-for-like replacement of the Cold War nuclear missile system, the Trident missile system, over the next 25 years. It'll cost you, all of us, £100 billion. We can't afford it.
We've been through a terrible financial recession, a global financial recession, and every time we've had to make big choices about what we do. To support the economy when there was no private investment happening, to support people who were unemployed so that we could keep unemployment down, to support mortgages so that there were no mortgage repossessions like the 1990s. Now, we're at a critical point in our economy now, and I'll be honest with you, you cannot afford to take money out of the economy now because you will put jobs at risk, businesses at risk, and you will put the whole recovery at risk. £6 billion out of the economy means lost jobs, it means lost businesses, it means lost growth. If you take that money out now, I fear for what could happen, and we do not want to have a double-dip recession in this country. Take £6 billion out, and it's the equivalent of taking out thousands of jobs in this economy today, and making a lot of jobs that are safe at the moment unsafe. I would not recommend that at all.
Let me take on, Robert, this argument directly, the idea that if you cut waste this year, you endanger the recovery. Now, just this week, we've seen two, I think, pretty hideous waste stories. The first is that civil servants have been given credit cards funded by the taxpayer to go out and spend that on food and wine and other things, and that's cost £1 billion. The second story was that managers in the National Health Service, many of whom are paid over £250,000, have had a 7% pay rise. Now, are we honestly saying that if you didn't have that sort of waste, that sort of excess, that our economy would collapse? I think it is nonsense. It's like saying that giving up smoking is somehow going to be bad for your health. Giving up waste would be good for our economy, and it would mean that we could stop this tax rise that's coming down the track that Britain's biggest business leaders all say will stop jobs. Cut the waste, stop the tax. That's the right answer.
Look, these two constantly argue about waste as if we can create or we can fill the black hole in the public finances by saving money on paper clips and pot plants in Whitehall. Of course we can get rid of a bit of waste, but that isn't the big, that doesn't really address the big questions we need to ask ourselves. And I think we need to be clear with you, open with you, straight with you. We've tried to do that. We set out £15 billion worth of savings. I've listed some of them. We have one specific tax that we want to introduce to help fill the black hole. We would impose a 10% tax on the profits of the banks. these banks who've got us into the trouble in the first place. I think they should pay you back because you, the taxpayer, have bailed them out, and use that money to deal with the black hole in the finances. But let's not get obsessed about mythical savings in waste, which is the oldest trick in the book to pretend that you can square a circle like that, or get obsessed about when you deliver these cuts. The crucial thing is, are we going to be open with people, with you, about how we're going to save money in the long term?
Well, just think how difficult it is to save 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, a million, and then think of 6,000 million to be saved in the next 9 months before the end of the financial year. Now, I fear for our economy if that happens. The only way we've kept our economy moving forward is not because there's been private investment or bank lending, it's because the government has had to step in to make sure that there is sufficient growth. And we prevented unemployment going to the levels of America and Europe. I say you've got to keep that support now. Every other European country, America, agrees with that. Only the Conservative Party is against keeping that support in the economy now. Now, of course, we've got to deal with waste. But if you take the waste out, you put more money into the economy to make sure the economy can continue to grow. It's the only way we can save jobs and businesses in this country now. And I say to the whole audience here and to the nation, it is important at this moment to take no risk with the recovery. Once again, the Conservatives are showing they are a risk to the recovery in this country.
Nick Clegg.
Well, we all know we've got this great black hole in our public finances. That's obvious. We all know that we're going to have to save money. We all know that we're going to have to make cuts. The question at this election is, who is trying to be straight with you about the scale of those cuts, how long they'll take? As it happens, this is one area where I would like for once to see politicians put people before politics. And what I'm suggesting, I don't know whether Gordon Brown and David Cameron would take up this invitation, is that regardless of the outcome of the general election, that we get the Chancellor and the Shadow Chancellors together, the Governor of the Bank of England, the Head of the Financial Services Authority, to come clean with you about how big this structural deficit is. It's estimated to be somewhere around £70 billion, and straight with you, finally, about how long it is going to take to fill
David
that.
Cameron.
There's no doubt the country is going to have to come together to deal with this really big problem of the deficit. I mean, for every £4 that we spend right now, the government is borrowing one of those pounds. But Nick keeps saying he's being very straight with you. In his manifesto is a promise for a £17 billion tax cut. It's a great idea. I'd love to do it, but we don't have £17 billion for a tax cut.
Nick Clegg, on that specific
We've
point.
spelt out exactly where that money would come from. We would, for instance, stop this grotesque spectacle of this unfair tax system which has been built up under succession of Labour and Conservative governments, where right now a greedy banker in the City of London pays a lower rate of tax on their capital gains than their cleaner does on their wages. We have a tax system which is unfair.
Back to the question Robert put. The PCT, the Health Authority, was finding it very difficult because of the situation at the moment. Take thousands of millions out of the economy now. Take 6 billion out of the economy now and think of the risk to jobs and businesses. And I say to the Conservatives, of course we want efficiency savings and of course we want to deal with waste, but we cannot afford to see private investment so small and then public investment cut at this time.
David Cameron.
And lots of jobs put at risk. Please tell us you won't do that.
£6 billion is one out of every £100 the government spends. Now, what small business in this recession, what big business hasn't had to make that sort of decision? Many people making a much bigger decision. Turn it round the other way and think about it like this. Gordon is effectively saying, I want to go on wasting money now, so I put up your taxes later. Why should we pay our taxes for government waste?
We've got a responsibility for the overall growth rate of the economy. We've got to get this economy moving forward. You can't do it with private investment alone. The government has got to play its role. Now, next year, we'll make these bigger savings, and of course, we're going to pay for health and for education and for policing by what we do on national insurance. But this year, don't pull the money out of the economy. Don't put good people's jobs and their businesses at risk
David
now.
Cameron.
But why do you think it is, I would say, that 100 of the leading business people in this country, people who run some of the biggest businesses, like Chorus, like Logica, like Mothercare, what they say, and they couldn't be more clear, the risk to the economy is not cutting waste, the risk to the economy is Labour's proposal of a jobs tax.
Gordon Brown on that specific point.
Why do they say it?
The risk to the economy is this year, and every country, America, the rest of Europe, including Britain, is saying we've got to make sure we invest in the economy this year so that we can have the growth we need. Now, pull out the money, and you've proposed it at every point during this recession. pull out the money, and you'll have less growth, you'll have less jobs, and you will have less businesses. Now, that's a fear. We've got to take an overall responsibility for the whole economy.